Hey guys, tonight we're slipping off our shoes and sprinting barefoot through the myths, chasing after a god who never sits still. You're clutching a lyre made from a turtle shell, dodging divine cattle hooves, and ducking behind Mount Serene before the grown-ups realize what you've done. Your feet are fast, your tongue even faster. Welcome to the world of Hermes, ancient Greece's most charming delivery service, professional boundary crosser, and part-time infant thief. And honestly, you probably won't survive this if you expect things to make perfect sense. Hermes doesn't do straight lines, or warnings, or consequences. He's got somewhere to be, usually everywhere, and if you blink, you'll miss the punchline. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive at the edge of a cave in Arcadia. It's quiet, almost too quiet. Inside, a baby lies in a cradle, swaddled in innocence and very suspicious stillness. This is Hermes, born of Maya's shy mountain nymph, certified quiet type, and Zeus, the king of inconvenient paternity suits. The other gods don't expect much from this newborn. He's just a few hours old and already plotting. You watch as baby Hermes waits for his mother to nap. Then he slinks out of the cradle like a silk scarf sliding off a table and disappears into the wild barefoot and giggling. First, stop Apollo's sacred cattle. Because if you're going to steal something, make it legendary. Mainstream historical fact, according to the Homeric hymn to Hermes, the god committed his first act of theft on the day of his birth. That's not rowdy teenager levels of chaos. That's Olympic-grade overachievement. Hermes herds the cattle backwards, yes, backwards, so the hoofprints confuse anyone tracking him. He wears leafy sandals to hide his own footprints. Honestly, it's less a heist and more a one-man logistics operation with a touch of baby giggle. And then, because theft isn't enough, he invents music. You watch him spot a tortoise. He compliments it, politely picks it up, hollows out the shell, and stretches strings across it using animal gut. The result, the lyre. Yes, the famous instrument later gifted to Apollo. Hermes invents it in a moment of pure inspiration and unlicensed biology. Fringe tidbit. Some myths claim Hermes also created fire by rubbing sticks together and then pretended someone else invented it because he didn't want to fill out the divine patent forms. Later, Apollo finds the cattle missing and goes full solar rage. He confronts Hermes, who in perhaps the most iconic baby defense of all time, pretends to be asleep. Zeus is summoned. Arguments are made. And somehow Hermes talks his way out of it. Not only that, he charms Apollo with the sound of the lyre and gives it to him as a gift. Yes, Hermes steals from Apollo, then invents music as an apology, and ends up being praised for it. That's the Hermes brand. Historians still argue whether Hermes' first myth is meant to be taken as comic relief, cultural symbolism, or theological foreshadowing. But one thing's clear, he's not just clever. He's divinely necessary. The gods can't function without someone who understands movement, transitions, negotiation, mischief with purpose. And you can't help but smile. Because here's this baby barely out of the womb, already disrupting divine power structures and winning friends through invention, wit, and nerve. You watch Zeus laugh despite himself. Apollo grudgingly smirks. Even Maya, when Hermes slides back into his cradle, raises one eyebrow like, "I know what you did." But she doesn't scold him, because Hermes is what the gods need. Not more might, not more thunder, but a bridge, a messenger, a trickster who serves the order of Olympus by bending it just enough to make things move. You lean back on the cave floor and exhale. It's only been one day, and he's just getting started. You blink, and suddenly the baby is gone. Not in a someone calls security kind of way, but in the he's already halfway across Greece with your favorite sandals and probably your wallet kind of way. Hermes doesn't sit still. He flies, glides, slinks, and dashes through realms like gravity is just a suggestion. And now you see why. In your hand, somehow, is his caduceus, a slender staff entwined with two snakes crowned with wings. It hums faintly, not menacingly. More like a clever inside joke you're not quite in on. You look down and see that your shoes are no longer yours. They're winged. Oh, you're wearing Hermes' sandals. The world tilts. You feel lighter, literally. The air grabs your calves with gentle urgency. The soles beneath your feet barely acknowledge the ground. Welcome to Hermes Mode Delivery Express, with no doorbell and questionable ethics. Mainstream historical fact. Hermes' two primary symbols, the caduceus and the talaria, those iconic winged sandals, marked him as a figure of movement. Not just speed, but transition. Boundaries were his playground. He crossed sky, land, sea, and even the realm of the dead without so much as a passport check. You take a step and immediately soar above a city of white marble and sunburned gods. Hermes isn't just fast. He's everywhere, and everything about him says go. But let's talk about this staff for a moment. The caduceus gets confused with the rod of Asclepius, which only has one snake and no wings. That's the actual symbol of healing. Hermes' staff, not about healing. It's about communication, exchange, commerce, and let's be honest, a dash of supernatural persuasion. Fringe tidbit. Some scholars say the intertwining snakes represent duality, order, and chaos, logic, and mischief, buyer and seller. Others say Hermes once used the staff to stop two snakes from fighting, and they just stayed there, like snake-shaped PR interns. You hover near a cliff edge, wind in your face, sandals humming quietly. This is freedom. Hermes doesn't follow roads, he dances between them. He isn't tied to Olympus like Zeus, or the underworld like Hades, or a city-state like Athena. He's the in-between, the space between gods and mortals, between thought and action, between what is said and what is meant. You descend just slightly and land beside a man arguing loudly in the agora over a shipment of fish. Hermes would love this. The haggle, the fast-talking, the mild chaos disguised as a marketplace. Because Hermes isn't just the god of messages, he's the god of commerce too. Of merchants and traders and street hustlers with too many olives and not enough conscience. Every coin flipped, every contract signed under suspicious candlelight, that's Hermes' domain. He blesses the liar who almost tells the truth. The merchant who sells slightly expired spices with a winning smile. The diplomat who bends a little to avoid a war. Hermes doesn't just approve, he cheers them on. Historians still argue whether Hermes represents morality or its creative circumvention. But really, he embodies something simpler movement as survival. Adaptability, swiftness, the ability to pivot, to fly when walking isn't fast enough, and to whisper when shouting won't work. You sit now at a crossroads. Literally, 4 paths diverging, no signposts, just wind and sand, and distant temple bells. And there in the center is a Hermes stone pillar, topped with a head usually Hermes, and rather boldly male anatomy. These statues marked boundaries, intersections, and spaces of decision. Travelers would leave offerings at Hermes, pebbles, coins, prayers mumbled under their breath, hoping for safe passage or clever shortcuts. You add a small pebble of your own. It feels right, because every messenger, even divine ones, needs a starting point. And here's the thing. Hermes' tools aren't just accessories. They're contracts. The sandals. Not just for speed, but for access to skies, realms, and situations mortals wouldn't dare touch. The staff, not just a badge of office, but a key capable of unlocking languages, smoothing over lies, and closing the distance between minds. With them, Hermes becomes not just a character in a myth, but a medium. Of speech, of change, of movement in all its chaotic beauty. And you're wearing the wings now. You press your heel to the earth. You rise. And as you take flight again, and the horizon stretches open, like a letter you're just about to read, you don't land so much as slide into the next scene, like the air itself handed you off to a gentler breeze. One moment you're soaring above temples and laurel groves. The next, your feet touch the cobblestones of a torch-lit courtyard, humming with low conversation. And Hermes is already here. Of course he is. You spot him leaning casually against a column, 1 foot propped arms, folded half smiling, as a messenger in a dusty tunic delivers urgent news to a general who pretends he's not sweating. Hermes isn't needed here. He's already done his work. This is just the ripple. Because Hermes doesn't only deliver the messages of Olympus, he delivers all of them. Your whispered secrets delivered. Your desperate midnight prayer to no one in particular. Yep, routed to the proper inbox. Your sarcastic comment under your breath during temple offerings. Sorry to break it to you, but Hermes probably snuck that into a memo to Hera just to stir the pot. Mainstream historical fact. Hermes was considered the divine herald, not just for Zeus, but for all the Olympians. He carried instructions, warnings, invitations, and sometimes just juicy gossip that absolutely couldn't wait until the next thunderstorm-based family meeting. And unlike other gods who needed incense and gold to show up, Hermes had a habit of just appearing. A breeze, a glint of light, a voice that seems to know your thoughts before you say them. That's Hermes. Listening, recording, rerouting. You pass through the courtyard and into the street. It's early evening now. People are pouring wine, arguing about politics, stealing fruit. You see Hermes again this time as a courier boy delivering a scroll to a stoic philosopher who mutters, "It's from her again, isn't it?" Hermes just winks. He's everyone and no one. Always mid-stride. Never not on his way to something. And it's not just words he carries. Hermes is also a conductor of souls, not just in the underworld, but here too. He ferries emotion, intention. You felt it those moments when a message arrives at exactly the wrong moment or the right one and changes your course. That's Hermes nudging, whispering, smirking, fringe tidbit. In some mystery cults, Hermes was believed to carry not only the words of the gods, but their dreams, delivering symbolic images as packages slipped under your pillow, often with no return address. Historians still argue whether Hermes' role as messenger made him neutral or complicit. He didn't judge the message. He simply delivered it. But sometimes, the way he chose to deliver it changed everything. Like when he told Calypso that Odysseus must be freed, or when he relayed Zeus's orders to Persephone to return to her mother. Or that time, he may have delivered a fake invitation to a divine dinner party just to see how Athena would handle social rejection. Allegedly. You watch as Hermes stops at a fountain, dips his fingers in, and flicks a droplet toward a nearby couple arguing softly. The tension breaks. They laugh. The message arrived unspoken, unseen, but delivered all the same. He turns and catches your eye. It's hard to look at him for long. Not because he's blinding like Apollo or towering like Zeus, but because he shifts. One moment he's youthful, sharp-eyed, all cheekbones and cleverness. The next, older, wise, worn around the edges, like someone who's read too many goodbye letters and delivered too few apologies. He walks past you, no footsteps, just presence. You follow. Through alleys and over rooftops into a quiet room where a scribe is hunched over a scroll. Hermes leans close to him, whispers something, and the scribe's hand begins to move faster. The words pour out. You can't read them, but they hum. They matter. They feel true whether they are or not. Because that's the thing about messages. They're not just about content. They're about timing. And Hermes, he's the maestro of the moment. The king of Kairos, the right moment, the thin slice of time where meaning actually lands. You step back into the street. The sun has dipped. Lanterns flicker. Somewhere, a new message begins its journey. A birth announcement, a declaration of war, a simple line, "Come home." All of them carried on Hermes' invisible circuit, mapped not by roads, but by need. You sit on the steps of a temple watching the stars rise and feel it. The truth that messages aren't neutral, that who delivers them matters, and that sometimes the God delivering your thoughts might edit for clarity tone or sheer chaos. Because Hermes doesn't just move messages. He moves you. You follow a narrow dirt path just outside the city, no destination in mind, just the kind of aimless walking that Hermes himself would approve of. The sun dips low behind distant hills. Ahead, the road splits. One fork curves toward the mountains, the other disappears into a dense grove. And there he is again. Not in his winged sandals this time. No staff, no cloak. Just a traveler in a plain tunic, sitting cross-legged at the crossroads, casually tossing a coin and watching the shadows shift. Hermes smiles like he was expecting you. Because you've arrived at his favorite place, the threshold. The crossroads, the edges, the in-betweens. If Olympus is all thunder and declarations, Hermes prefers the places where things are undecided, where one step changes everything, and the wind can tip your future sideways if you're not careful, or if you are. Mainstream historical fact. Hermes was the god of liminality, of transitions, borders, thresholds, and boundaries, birth and death, sleep and wake, here and there. His presence was invoked not just when starting a journey, but any time you passed from one space identity or role into another. That's why his name shows up on boundary stones, on herms at road junctions, and on the lips of anyone who's ever whispered just one more risk under their breath. You glance at the coin he's flipping. It lands on his palm heads. He doesn't react, just flips it again. Hermes knows the value of chance. He knows that direction isn't always about logic. It's about timing, instinct, momentum. Sometimes you choose the path. Sometimes the path chooses you. And sometimes you just follow the messenger who's grinning like he knows the end of your story. You sit beside him. The grove rustles. He tells you about borders, not just physical ones, but emotional, spiritual, social. The moments where you shift between one identity and the next. The child to the adult. The student to the teacher. The guest to the host. Hermes is there for all of it. A quiet witness with a smirk. Fringe tidbit. Some ancient Greeks believed Hermes could be tricked into revealing secrets at crossroads if you left an offering and asked the right question at midnight. But of course, if you misunderstood the answer that was on you. He stands suddenly brushing dust from his knees and begins walking toward the grove. You follow naturally. The trees close in and the path disappears. But Hermes doesn't slow. He knows these places uncharted, half-lit, full of maybe. And as you walk, he tells you stories of travelers who left offerings at Hermes and found their lost way, of merchants who whispered thanks after successful trades, of messengers who were never seen again, but whose words arrived anyway. He tells you that crossroads aren't just where paths meet. They're where fates tangle. Historians still argue whether Hermes was truly a god of luck or just of choice. But the result is often the same. You stand at a line, you hesitate, you pick a direction, and suddenly you're someone else. That's Hermes. Not the one who decides for you, but the one who watches you decide, then winks. You ask him if he ever gets tired of being in between everything. He shrugs. Boundaries are boring, he says. But the moment right before you cross one, that's where all the juice is. You emerge from the trees and find yourself somehow on a mountain pass overlooking two cities. One glittering with torches and ceremony, the other quiet, modest humming with song. Hermes points, but doesn't say which way, because it's not his job to choose. It's just his job to be there when you do. You glance back and he's gone again. Maybe up the path, maybe down the other, maybe beside you the whole time. You look at the crossroads one more time, at the hermstone nestled between them. You place a pebble at its base, not to ask for help, but to say thank you. Because in the spaces where most gods look away, Hermes waits. And in every edge you cross, he crosses with you. You walk through a busy harbor now, bronze gleaming sails snapping, merchants shouting prices like they're daring someone to call their bluff. The sun is bright, the scent of brine sharp, and the coin purse tied at your waist suddenly lighter. You glance down, gone, you spin, and standing 3 paces away is a boy no older than 12, grinning like a cat who's just filed a tax return in your name. He tosses your coin pouch once, twice, then flips it back to you empty. You blink. He bows. Hermes. Again. This time as a thief. But not the kind who disappears in the dark. The kind who announces the theft, smiles while doing it, and probably improves your reputation in the process. Mainstream historical fact, Hermes was not just the god of trade and travel, he was also the god of thieves. And not despite his mischief, but because of it. Theft in Hermes's world wasn't a crime, it was a craft, an art. A performance requiring cleverness, timing, and an almost poetic lack of shame. You follow him through the market now. He zips through the crowd like wind in a curtain, pausing only to admire a stall of bronze tools. He picks one up, examines it, and without asking, adjusts the angle of a blade with a tiny shim made from olive wood. He hands it back. The blacksmith, initially fuming, blinks at the improved edge and says, "Thank you." Because Hermes isn't just a thief. He's also the god of invention. And when he steals, he often gives back something better. Fringe tidbit Hermes was credited with inventing a dizzying number of things: the lyre, the shepherd's pipes, astronomy weights, and measures, even dice, yes, the literal tools of chance and fate. Some even say language itself was shaped under his clever fingers, somewhere between a bargain and a lie. You duck into a shady corner, watching him crouch to help a young girl fix her broken cartwheel. He mutters something about axle pressure and the gods not knowing what they're doing with physics. The wheel holds. She beams. He steals one grape from her basket. She lets him. That's the Hermes way. Fix something. Take something. Leave people charmed enough not to care which came first. You step back out into the sun and feel a tug on your sleeve. A merchant, flustered. He gestures to the stall behind him. Empty. Gone, he says. 3 bolts of silk and a set of bronze weights. Just gone. Hermes strolls by. Winks. You don't ask questions. Historians still argue whether Hermes' association with theft was meant as a moral lesson or just a nod to how gray the world really is. He's not lawless. He just rearranges the rules until they fit a better story. And invention. It's just theft from the future. Hermes proves that stealing isn't always taking. Sometimes it's revealing what could exist if you're clever enough, fast enough, bold enough to grab it before the world notices. You follow him out of the city along a ridge above the port. There he kneels beside a pile of stones. His hand moves quickly, arranging the stones into a strange, angular device. 2 reeds, a taut string, a curved shard of bronze. He plucks it once. It makes a sound you've never heard before. Clear, melancholy, ancient and futuristic at once. He shrugs. Call it whatever you like, he says. Someone else will later. Then he leaves it behind. Because Hermes doesn't cling. He invents, he inspires, he vanishes. And you realize now his role as patron of thieves and inventors is the same role. Both are about seeing the gap, the flaw in the pattern, the thing that others miss. The best thieves notice what's unguarded. The best inventors notice what's missing. And Hermes, he sees both. You pause at the crest of the hill, watching him walk into the setting sun. No theft today, no gift either. Just motion, pure, perfect motion. And behind you, the cart still rolls. The tools still shine. And the dice somewhere in the city below are still rolling. Night falls gently, as if Hermes himself whispered it into being. The stars blink awake, and the sky unfurls like a scroll no one's brave enough to read all at once. You lie down beneath a crooked olive tree sandals off, head tilted skyward. The air is thick with silence until it isn't. A voice, soft, insistent, not quite your own. You're not asleep, but you're not fully awake either. Welcome to the dream zone. Hermes' favorite time to meddle without having to knock. Mainstream historical fact, in addition to his many other titles, Hermes was known as a bringer of dreams, specifically true dreams. As one of the only Olympians granted safe passage between the waking world and the shadowy land of sleep, Hermes slipped between dreams like a poet with a deadline, and no respect for genre. You feel him now, not walking but gliding, weightless present, only as a tickle at the edge of awareness. He speaks, but the words don't enter your ears. They unfurl behind your eyes. Message for you, he says casually. And then the dream begins. You see a friend you haven't spoken to in years. They hand you a candle, but it flickers out before you can ask why. A crow lands on your shoulder and recites your childhood address backward. In the distance, someone laughs, maybe you, maybe not. Hermes again, delivering symbols like a postal worker with a flair for metaphor. He doesn't just bring dreams, he curates them, not always kindly, but always cleverly. You shift slightly in your sleep. The dream shifts too. Now you're climbing a staircase that turns into a vine, which becomes a harp which plays itself when you cry. It would be poetic if it weren't so weird. Fringe tidbit. Some ancient Greeks believed that Hermes could disguise lies as dreams, messages from the gods. Yes, but sometimes filtered through his own mischievous mind. He could relay visions straight from Zeus, or throw in his own editorial notes just to make sure you didn't get too comfortable. Historians still argue whether Hermes' role in dreams made him a servant of truth or a saboteur of it. After all, dreams can reveal, but they also confuse. Illuminate, but blur. Hermes loves that, because clarity is too easy. He prefers when people wake up a little wiser, a little suspicious, and very slightly unsure if they've just been inspired or insulted. You float now, not walking, not thinking. Just drifting through a dreamscape stitched together from memory and metaphor. A doorway without a house, a coin that hums when it touches your palm, a scroll that reads, You already know the answer. Act like it. Thanks, Hermes. You catch a glimpse of him in the corner of the dream. He's leaning on his staff, one eyebrow raised, watching you try to decipher the meaning of a fish wearing spectacles. He mouths something. You lean in. He mouths it again, then smirks, vanishes. Classic. You wake slowly. The stars still hang above you. The olive branches rustle. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks, once then goes back to sleep. You blink, sit up, and realize the dream left something behind. Not physically, no golden feathers or magical coins. Just a feeling. A whisper lodged behind your ribs. A nudge in a new direction. Maybe the dream made sense. Maybe it didn't. Doesn't matter. It changed you. Hermes doesn't need you to understand him. He needs you to move. You dust yourself off, stand, and glance up at the sky. No sign of him. But you feel different. And if you listen closely, you hear a faint flutter like wings or laughter. Because that message, it was meant for you, whether you like it or not. You stand now at the mouth of a cave. Not the cozy kind with moss and warm tea energy. This one breathes cool air from deep underground, exhaling the smell of old stone, silent footsteps, and memory. Behind you, olive trees sway gently in the wind. In front of you, nothing moves, except the shadows that shift too deliberately to be imagined. You're not alone. Hermes steps beside you this time, wrapped in a traveler's cloak, face quiet. No grin, no wink, just calm. The kind that comes from walking between the worlds of the living and the dead. So often the lines become thin. He doesn't ask if you're ready. He just starts walking. Welcome to Hermes as Psychopompos, guide of souls, escort of the newly dead, and arguably the only god who can enter the underworld without needing a dramatic theme song or hostage exchange. Mainstream historical fact. Hermes was entrusted with safely delivering souls to Hades, not judging them, not punishing, just guiding, holding space, showing the way. While other gods ruled realms or storms, Hermes walked with you at the very end and never let you feel alone. You step softly beside him. The path curves down. The air grows heavy, not suffocating but solemn. Somewhere in the dark, water drips at a steady pace like a heartbeat that doesn't belong to you. You glance at Hermes. He seems smaller here. Not diminished, just quieter. His caduceus glows faintly. Not with power, but with permission. Like a lamp held in a place where light is optional. And suddenly the role makes sense. He's the only god they all trust. The dying, the dead, the gods above, even Hades. Because Hermes doesn't judge. He just carries the message. And when needed you pass a doorway framed in obsidian. Behind it you glimpse a man kneeling by a river whispering names into the current. Another sits beside a shadowy dog, three-headed drowsy bored. The dead here don't scream. They don't moan. They simply wait. Hermes pauses beside one soul, a boy no older than 10 who doesn't know where to go. Hermes kneels, speaks softly, offers his hand. And when the boy takes it, the shadows part, and the path appears beneath his feet. That's the gift. Not answers. Just direction. Fringe tidbit. Some mystery traditions claim that if you whispered Hermes' name as your final breath, your journey would be gentler. That the messenger would come quicker. That the gates would open a little wider. Whether true or not, it says everything about what people hoped for, not just peace, but companionship. Historians still argue whether Hermes' underworld role was minor or essential. But when the veil is thin and the myths blur, what matters isn't who rules, it's who walks beside you. And that's always been Hermes. You step deeper now. Past offerings left at tombs. Past names scratched into rock. Past statues so old they've forgotten who they honor. And at every turn, Hermes leads without pulling, guides without pressure, stays present but never intrusive. Eventually the path curls upward again, not toward Olympus, just back. You re-emerge under starlight. The olive grove hasn't changed. But you have. You're aware now of how close the worlds are, how the divine doesn't just sit in golden halls, but walks behind us, especially when the road turns dark. Hermes turns to you, expression soft. Most messages, he says, never make it here. You nod. Because you understand. Some messages are never meant to be spoken, only carried. Gently, carefully, without judgment. You leave the cave behind. But a part of you doesn't. It walks just a little lighter now. Because the moment you needed a guide, you already had one. The next morning finds you standing in the middle of an argument. Not your argument, thankfully, but the kind of divine squabble that feels more like a chess game played with lightning bolts and grudges instead of pieces. On one side of the courtyard, Hera, eyes narrowed, like she's 2 blinks away from rewriting the marriage contract of the universe. On the other, Apollo glowing with righteousness and mild sunstroke. Between them, a space no god wants to step into. Except, of course, Hermes. He appears just as voices start to rise. Not from the sky, not with thunder, but from the side, the way a clever idea slips into your head mid-sentence. He's got his sleeves rolled scrolls tucked under one arm, and a look that says, let's all take a deep breath, or at least pretend to, until the wine arrives. Because Hermes isn't just the messenger, he's the negotiator. The divine deal-maker, mainstream historical fact. Hermes often served as the mediator among gods, smoothing over conflicts, calming tempers, and more than once preventing Olympian showdowns from turning into planetary renovations. You watch as he glides between the 2 deities, speaking softly, cracking a joke, just clever enough to land, but not offend. He reframes Apollo's accusation. He translates Hera's silence. He leans in, nods, listens, and somehow both gods begin to soften. This is his real magic. He doesn't need thunder. He doesn't need war. Hermes changes minds with words, with charm patience, and a kind of verbal judo that leaves both parties convinced they've won. Fringe tidbit. In certain lost fragments, Hermes is said to have once convinced Ares not to attack Dionysus during a festival by distracting him with a drinking contest and letting him win. That's diplomacy with bonus entertainment. He steps back now, letting the resolution settle like warm olive oil over bread. Hera nods. Apollo scoffs but says nothing. The crisis dissolves, and Hermes already moving on. You follow him down a marble corridor. He tells you about the art of the deal. Not the kind that wins empires, but the kind that keeps them from falling apart. Hermes mediates between gods and mortals, and monsters, sometimes even gods in themselves. Like that time he convinced Hades to let Persephone return to Demeter. A negotiation involving seasonal custody, symbolic pomegranate math, and absolutely no room for error. Hermes pulled it off. Historians still argue whether Hermes was genuinely impartial or just a skilled manipulator. After all, he served Zeus, but he helped mortals. He was loyal to Olympus, but never afraid to stretch the truth like fresh cheesecloth when it served peace. You step into a smaller chamber now, where a group of mortals wait nervously beside a bronze altar. They're emissaries from rival city-states, Athens and Corinth. War seems likely. Tempers are high. Hermes enters no divine fanfare and just starts talking. Not at them, with them. He asks questions no one expected. What does your city smell like at dusk? Who in the other city makes the best bread? What would your mother say if she saw you here? They laugh despite themselves. Then they talk. Then they argue. Then they listen. And by sunset, the air has changed. No treaty is signed. But a letter is drafted. That's enough. Because Hermes doesn't force peace. He opens the window. If someone's ready to take the olive branch, he hands it over. If not, he smiles, files the conversation away, and waits. He always waits. You return to the courtyard from before. Hera and Apollo are gone. In their place, a faint scent of rose water and sun-scorched parchment. You sit down on the stone steps, watching the clouds roll in. Hermes leans beside you, unbothered. Most conflicts, he says, aren't about who's right. You nod. They're about who wants to be heard and who's brave enough to listen. And with that, he stands. Scroll under one arm, half a smile on his lips. Moving on. Again. Because there's always a new tension, a fresh mess, an almost war that needs just the right word at just the right time. And Hermes, he's already halfway there. You're in a crowded street now, not ancient, not modern. Just timeless. The kind of place where clothing styles blur architecture, forgets what century it belongs to. And people pass by each other too quickly to notice the man who walks among them in ever-changing form. Hermes again. But this time, you don't recognize him right away. At first, he's an old man with a walking stick and a knowing smile. Then a traveler with dusty boots and a feather tucked behind his ear. Then a laughing boy with ink-stained fingers and a coin behind his ear that wasn't there before. Hermes is the god of disguise, not just the fake mustache kind, but the full-spectrum identity-fluid voice-shifting. You'll only realize it was him once you reread the scene kind of transformation. You start watching more carefully. You see a woman weaving at the market stall, narrating jokes under her breath to no one in particular. Her eyes flicker gold for half a second. Hermes, a man selling scrolls with suspiciously good poems. Hermes, a beggar child who drops a coin at your feet, then disappears into the crowd. Hermes again. Or maybe not. And that's the point. Mainstream historical fact. Hermes was known in classical mythology for taking on many guises, blending in among mortals, slipping into situations unseen, or appearing as exactly the person you needed to meet, without realizing it was him until later, if ever. He was the master of shape, the spinner of forms. You duck into a quiet courtyard, heart racing slightly from the realization that you may have passed him 10 times already. There's no divine aura, no trumpets or glowy robes. Hermes doesn't need a stage. He is the stagehand, the playwright, and half the audience. Fringe tidbit. Some myths whisper that Hermes once entered a royal court as 3 different people, an ambassador, a jester, and a guard, simultaneously, just to observe how each one was treated before delivering his actual message. Spoiler, the jester got the best answers. Historians still argue whether these stories of disguise reflect Hermes' devotion to observation or just his pathological need to mess with people. Honestly, it's probably both. You begin noticing more. The traveler on the road who gives directions so vague, they somehow become poetry. The child who returns your dropped satchel and says, "That's not where you're meant to be going." The old woman who tells you a joke about Zeus and a chicken and disappears before you can laugh. All little masks, echoes. Hermes isn't hiding to deceive. He's hiding to reveal. Because sometimes, if you know who's speaking, you stop listening. If you think you know the messenger, you filter the message. Hermes slips past that. He becomes whatever form gets past your defenses. And maybe he becomes you. You pause in front of a polished brass mirror, hanging outside a merchant's tent. Your reflection tilts its head a second before you do. You blink. The mirror blinks back. Then normal, mostly. You hear Hermes' voice behind you. Not spoken aloud, but felt like a thought that wasn't yours. Sometimes the only way to tell the truth is to change the voice saying it. You nod. Because you get it now. The disguise isn't deception. It's permission. To say what must be said. To reach who must be reached. To be many things at once and none of them quite wrong. You leave the courtyard and return to the crowded street, seeing Hermes in every face now. In the helper, the heckler, the guide, the bystander. In the stranger who looks like someone you once knew. And just maybe, in the person you'll become tomorrow. The workshop is small, cluttered, chaotic, glorious. You duck your head to avoid a hanging brass bell sidestep, a teetering stack of scrolls, and almost trip over a pile of lyre strings tangled with a pair of sandals that definitely shouldn't be hissing. Hermes sits in the center of it. All sleeves rolled up, tools and hand hair dusted with chalk or stardust, you're not sure which. He's inventing something. Again, you can't tell what it is yet. Some fusion of gears and reeds, a humming string, a hollow shell. It smells like pine copper, and the exact moment before an idea fully arrives. Because Hermes isn't just the god of movement or words. He's also the god of invention. And when he's not ferrying messages, he's making something that didn't exist yesterday. Mainstream historical fact. Hermes was credited with inventing a shocking number of things in Greek mythology, some practical, some poetic, some suspiciously specific. The lyre, the shepherd's pipes, the art of fire starting, even weights and measures. In many ways, he was the divine patron of technology before technology had a name. He hands you a tiny flute made from bone. Blow gently, he says, and returns to adjusting something that may or may not be a toaster. You try it. The note you produce somehow makes you think of running water and first kisses. Weird. And that's the thing with Hermes' creations. They're not just tools. They're experiences. His inventions don't just work. They mean something. You ask him about language. He shrugs. Might have helped it along, he says. Historians still argue whether Hermes invented language itself or just got it drunk and nudged it into poetry. Some say he whispered the first stories to mortal ears, shaping early mythologies with rhythm and mischief. He definitely invented dice. Which, if you think about it, is incredibly on brand. Rolling bones, trusting fate, hoping the gods are distracted while you cheat a little. That's Hermes in a nutshell. Fringe tidbit. One minor cult believed Hermes invented timekeeping, not in hours or days, but in moments. They claimed he placed Kairos, the right time, into the hands of those clever enough to recognize it. Not a sundial, but a feeling. A divine nudge. Like getting up early and knowing something big is about to happen. That's Hermes' timepiece ticking under your ribs. You glance at the cluttered shelves. There's a half-built compass with a quill nib instead of a needle. A pair of boots with tiny bronze wings that flap when you say hurry. A scroll that unrolls in reverse and erases your memory of the last word you read, just to keep you curious. He doesn't organize, he iterates. You ask him where the ideas come from. He pauses, then says, between boredom and necessity. Just wide enough for mischief to sneak in. You write that down. He frowns. Don't quote me. Too late. You peer into the next room and find a pile of musical instruments. All strange. One looks like a harp made from silverfish bones. Another buzzes when you touch it, but only in minor keys. He hands you a small pendant. For inspiration, he says. You wear it. Suddenly, everything around you feels possible. because that's Hermes' other invention curiosity. He didn't just hand mortals tools, he handed them questions, things to fiddle with. He planted restlessness, called it innovation, and left the door open just wide enough for humanity to start building. And what did he never invent? Rules. He leaves that to other gods. Hermes builds exceptions, shortcuts, elegant hacks that upset old systems just enough to make space for something new. You look down at the object he was working on earlier. It's finished now. A compass. But instead of pointing north, it points to whatever you want most, if you're honest with yourself. Which, of course, is the hard part. You try it. It spins once, then settles. You look up. Hermes is gone. But the compass still hums in your palm, and around you, the room is quiet, waiting for the next idea, for your first invention, for the thing you haven't made yet, but will. You walk beside the firelight of an ancient hall. It's quiet here, not empty, but watchful. The kind of place where the words of long-dead poets still hover midair, never quite ready to fade. The walls hum with meter and memory, and somewhere nearby, a lyre plucks itself back to life. Hermes is here, not in person, not fully, but in verse. Because this is the world of Homer and Hesiod, the oldest voices of Greek mythology, and Hermes ever, the multitasker, is already written into the scroll before you finished unrolling it. Mainstream historical fact. Hermes appears in both the Homeric hymns and the Iliad, as well as in Hesiod's Theogony, where he's celebrated, feared, teased, and occasionally sighed at, like a brilliant younger sibling who definitely didn't read the rules before rewriting them. You sit near the hearth, a copy of the Homeric hymn to Hermes laid open across your knees. The lines sing of a newborn god who, on his first day of life, invented the lyre, stole a herd of sacred cattle, and talked his way out of divine punishment with a smile and a song. You read, "A child born at dawn, by dusk, played music sweet as ambrosia." It shouldn't be so funny, but it is. Hermes is the only god whose official origin myth reads like a comedy caper written by a divine playwright with a soft spot for loopholes. Hesiod, the crankier of the two poets, is more cautious in his praise. He admits Hermes is clever, useful, necessary. But you can practically feel his suspicion oozing through the lines, like he knows Hermes would absolutely steal his inkwell while complimenting his meter. And he's right. Fringe tidbit. Some ancient commentaries suggest that bards themselves considered Hermes their patron less because he invented the lyre, and more because he understood storytelling as movement. Every tale a journey, every verse a road, every punchline a trick that carried you into truth. Historians still argue whether the poets intended Hermes to be taken seriously, or if he was more of a divine supporting actor, an intermission between thunder and tragedy. But the deeper you read, the clearer it becomes. Hermes is the thread that stitches chaos to purpose. You flip to the Iliad. Hermes appears briefly sent by Zeus to guide King Priam safely through enemy lines so he can retrieve the body of his son Hector. It's one of the quietest, most human moments in the epic. No battles, no speeches, just an old man grieving, and a god who helps him walk through danger unseen. You realize now Hermes isn't just the fast talker, the schemer, the boundary breaker. He's also the one who knows when to soften his voice, to guide without mocking, to carry a message made entirely of silence. You run your finger along the lines of ancient script. The language still flickers. The stories still move. And Hermes, woven into the oldest verses we still whisper today, hasn't aged a day. You close the scroll and look up. The hall remains quiet, but the firelight burns a little brighter. Because somewhere between rhyme and rhythm, Hermes is still speaking. To the poets, to the tricksters. To you, you find yourself standing at the edge of a still pool, the kind that reflects everything too clearly. The air is thick with jasmine and risk. Something stirs beneath the surface, a ripple, a suggestion, a story you haven't heard yet, but definitely want to. And beside you, Hermes. But not the winged messenger, not the charming salesman or the guide of souls. This Hermes is different. Softer in stance, ambiguous in presence. No sharp lines, no strict definition. His features shimmer not with light, but with fluidity. You're standing beside the lover, the blur, the god, who never quite fits a single shape. Because Hermes was never bound by simple categories. And when it came to love, he was just as slippery, appearing in stories that feel like riddles, relationships that never quite behave, and boundaries that dissolve on contact. Mainstream historical fact. Hermes had many romantic liaisons, some mortal, some divine. He fathered children with Aphrodite, Dryope, and Penelope. Yes, that Penelope, depending on which myth you trust. But unlike other gods, whose conquests thundered with ego, Hermes' love stories are often strange, tender, or quietly weird. You wade into one of the oldest and oddest myths, Hermes and Aphrodite. Together, they bore a child named Hermaphroditus, a being of both masculine and feminine features. Later myth says Hermaphroditus merged with the water nymph Salmacis, forming a body that held both male and female characteristics in one form. It's not just a love story, it's a transformation tale. And Hermes, he doesn't fight it. He doesn't apologize for it. He understands it. Fringe tidbit. In some older depictions, Hermes was shown wearing women's garments during certain rituals, symbolizing not just disguise, but the crossing of social lines. A divine permission slip for anyone who's ever wanted to ask, what if I were allowed to be more than one thing? Historians still argue whether Hermes was truly gender fluid in ancient eyes, or if he simply stood beside fluidity as its guide, its godparent, its sly-eyed escort. But what's undeniable is this Hermes made space for ambiguity, for the in-between, for the version of love that doesn't sit still. You walk now through a garden blooming out of season. Roses next to snowdrops, vines that curve like script. Hermes strolls beside you, his fingers trailing across petals that change color as he passes. Love, he says, is a message with no sender. You blink, he smiles. Or maybe it has too many. You see his affection not in grand gestures, but in the small permissions, the pause before assuming. The touch that asks, the glance that invites, but never traps. Even the myths that pair him with mortals feel less like seduction and more like conversation. He doesn't conquer, he communicates. He speaks the language of the body, the mind, and the moment, and he's fluent in all dialects. You ask him if he's ever been in love. He shrugs. Once always depends how you measure it. You laugh, and somewhere inside something opens. Not like a door, more like a curtain you didn't realize was drawn. Because Hermes' love doesn't demand. It invites. It celebrates the strange, the shift, the in-progress. You lie back in the grass, now staring at stars that shimmer in no fixed pattern. He lies beside you. Two gods pass in the sky above, Artemis and Apollo, chasing and fleeing as always. But Hermes, he stays. Not to catch you, not to teach you. Just to say you don't have to be one thing, not all the time, not forever. You wake up in the middle of a forest, somehow still clothed, still calm, and entirely unsurprised. The leaves above flicker gold and green in a way that suggests no allegiance to season. The air buzzes not with insects, but with stories. Myths layered so thickly you can barely take a step without brushing against something sacred, strange, or slightly chaotic. And Hermes. He's already perched on a mossy rock eating figs from a pouch that doesn't seem to belong to him. He gestures for you to sit, grins, and says, "Let's talk about my cousins." By cousins, he means the tricksters, the ones who don't rule or smite or shine, but stir, prod, flip the board just as the game is getting boring. You've met them in stories before: Loki, who shape-shifts his way into and out of doom with a smirk; Anansi, the spider from West African folklore, who weaves tales and traps in equal measure; Coyote, the Native American figure who bumbles and dazzles through creation myths. All of them different, all of them familiar, because they are all somehow a reflection of Hermes, or perhaps he is a reflection of them. Mainstream historical fact: Hermes is one of the oldest documented trickster figures in European mythology, but the archetype itself spans every culture. Tricksters show up not to create balance, but to disrupt it, and in doing so reveal truths that more respectable gods would rather avoid. Hermes kicks off his sandal and begins mimicking Loki's dramatic hand gestures. "So much fire," he says with a snort. "So many children with wolves." Then he slips into a pitch-perfect coyote impression, growling and howling and knocking over a nearby amphora just for fun. You laugh. He laughs harder. Then he goes quiet. Because being a trickster isn't just about jokes. It's about function. Fringe tidbit anthropologists note that tricksters often emerge in societies to challenge rigid structures, religious, social, even linguistic. Hermes, as the patron of boundaries and transitions, fits this exactly. He doesn't destroy systems, he questions them. He finds the loophole, slides through it, then sends a postcard back labeled, "You're welcome." Historians still argue whether tricksters are inherently amoral or just morally complicated. Hermes leans back and says, "That depends. Am I helping you get unstuck, or helping myself to your sandals? And really, what's the difference?" You begin to notice patterns. Loki causes Ragnarok, but also helps the gods more times than he hurts them. Anansi tricks bigger animals, but teaches lessons about wisdom and humility. Coyote makes mistakes so wild they border on divine bloopers, but always survives, always learns. Hermes. He makes a joke, then turns it into a road, then a poem, then a letter. Then, if he's in the mood, a prophecy wrapped in a pun. You realize now all tricksters are bridge builders in disguise. Between gods and mortals. Between chaos and understanding. Between what you know and what you need to know next. Hermes picks up a stick and starts drawing in the dirt. A spiral, a knot, a map that loops back on itself. This, he says, is how truth really works. It's not a straight line. It's a detour with snacks. You watch as he tosses the fig stem over his shoulder, turns invisible for exactly 3 seconds just to prove he can, and then reappears upside down in a tree. Because tricksters, for all their wisdom, are also a little unhinged. And that's okay. You have to be to enjoy dancing on the line between order and entropy. Hermes drops from the branch and lands silently beside you. "Want to know the difference between me and them?" he asks. You nod. "I write my tricks down." You blink. He taps your shoulder. "Go ahead. Tell my stories. Just be ready for people to misunderstand them. That's half the fun." He walks away, whistling something that may or may not summon frogs. And you're left with this, that the trickster isn't here to break the world. They're here to remind you it bends. You blink, and when your eyes open, you're no longer in the forest. Now you're surrounded by marble and marble attitude. Pillars as tall as ambition's sandals, too clean to have walked anywhere real, and a crowd of gods frozen in perfect poses that suggest, no, you move first. This is not Olympus. This is Rome. And Hermes, he's here too. Except he's not called Hermes anymore. They call him Mercury now. Sleeker, sharper, dressed in empire-approved attire. Same sandals, slightly more polished. Same caduceus, but now used to bless commerce and profit more than poetry. Welcome to the Roman Remix. Mainstream historical fact: when the Romans adopted Greek gods, they didn't just copy-paste them. They rebranded them. Hermes became Mercury patron not just of messages, but of markets, merchants, and mail routes so complex they'd make a spreadsheet cry. You follow Mercury as he walks briskly through the forum, nodding at senators, slipping notes to generals, and inspecting coinage with a frown that says, "This isn't my best profile." He's a god of commerce now, of exchange, of information in motion. He hasn't lost his trickster spark. He's just learned to wear it with a toga. Fringe tidbit Roman merchants believed invoking Mercury would protect them from being cheated, which is delightfully ironic, given that the god himself once stole cattle from a sun god as a baby. But the Romans loved order, and Mercury gave them a god who understood both law and loophole. You watch as he blesses a caravan before it departs. Not with thunder, with words, a quick whisper, a wink, a promise that the road ahead will be smooth if you respect the god who made roads interesting. Then something shifts again. You're no longer in Rome. You're in Paris. And Hermes well. His name's still on the building, but now it's spelled Hermes, with an accent and a boutique price tag. You step inside. It smells like leather and candlelight and money being sublimated into scarf form. Around you, silk perfume horse saddles, really, and models who look like they only eat adjectives. And there on a shelf is the familiar symbol: winged sandals, not to fly, but to wear. Fringe tidbit: the French luxury house, Hermes et. 1837, originally made equestrian gear. The brand took the name not from fashion, but from the god of travel elegantly nodding to speed, grace, and craftsmanship. You realize now that Hermes never disappeared. He evolved into Mercury, the Roman postmaster of empires, into Hermes, the couture whisper of craftsmanship, into FedEx logos and running shoes and digital messages that fly across oceans faster than any myth. Historians still argue whether this transformation dilutes or deepens Hermes' legacy. But here's what's certain: he was always a symbol, and symbols adapt. He left Olympus not in exile, but in motion. Constant, graceful, and faster than fashion trends or memory. You step back outside where a delivery scooter zips past. Its logo, A-Wing. You smile. Because even now, maybe, especially now, Hermes moves through the world. Not with lightning, but with urgency. With cleverness. With a sense that you're one message, one step, one laugh away from understanding something new. You cross the street and the light changes just as you do. Coincidence, Hermes would never admit it. But he'd definitely wink. You're back on the road. But this time, it's paved in fiber optics. Glowing cables twist beneath your feet, like the world's biggest mythological spaghetti running beneath city seas, entire continents. The buzz in the air, Wi-Fi. The hum in your pocket notifications. Your footsteps echo softly through a digital landscape made of code memes and half-remembered usernames. And Hermes. He never left. He's just gone online. No sandals now, he's in sneakers. Caduceus, it's a stylus. He slides through crowded chat threads, whispering typos into place. He lives in your unread email, your late-night voice memo, the perfectly timed text that hits just as you were thinking it. Welcome to Hermes in the modern mind. And you thought the gods had retired. Mainstream historical fact: the archetype of the divine messenger, Hermes' core role, has been reimagined in every era. From ink-stained scrolls to postal services, telegram wires to fiber optics. He's remained the silent inspiration behind every human impulse to connect faster, clearer, and with a little flair. Today, he's in your inbox, sure. But he's also in your feed. Every time you hit send, Hermes stretches. Every time you refresh your screen and see something that shouldn't be there yet, he grins. He's the reason some messages arrive too soon and some too perfectly. He's the glitch you forgive because it made the meme funnier. He's the autocorrect that accidentally reveals what you really meant. Fringe tidbit. Some modern occult circles refer to Hermes as the god of the internet, the one who blesses the signal, smooths the bandwidth, and oversees chaotic group chats with the same energy he once brought to chaotic battlefield truces. Historians still argue whether Hermes belongs in this era or if we're just dragging him along for the ride. But here's the truth. Hermes doesn't need temples. He needs movement. And now, movement happens in milliseconds, in cloud backups, in blockchain packets, in the 8 tabs you forgot to close. He's thriving. You scroll past him every day. He's the anonymous commenter who makes you laugh and think. He's the trending tweet that reveals more about humanity than any philosopher ever dared. He's the nudge to check your messages, the urge to reply with a GIF, the gut feeling that says, "Don't send that. Send this instead." Hermes speaks meme fluently. He transcends platforms. He doesn't need a password, he already knows what it is. And still, he's more than the tech. He's in the act of connecting. The human need to be understood, even if only for a second. He's the force that makes you open your phone at 2:07 a.m. and message someone, "Are you awake?" He's the timing of the reply, the silence that means more, the message that says less but lands harder. You walk now along a city street, AirPods in screen-lit path, half-watched. Someone brushes past, a hoodie, a smirk, a winged shoe decal. Gone. You pause. Not because you're sure it was him, but because the timing was odd. You check your phone. A new message. No sender. Just 4 words. Go ahead. Say it. You do. And just like that, the spell completes. Hermes doesn't belong to the past. He never did. He belongs to the edges of time, to the speed of thought, to the hush before the voice note starts, to you, in motion, always. So now the story slows. Your heart beats quieter. The cables fall still, the messages pause, and the god with winged feet drifts just out of sight, never far, just waiting. Hermes, the messenger, the thief, the trickster, the guide. He was with you in the cradle, whispering jokes and lies that made you clever. He walked beside you at every fork in the road, offering no map, just a wink. He slipped your best sentence into the right person's inbox at the right time. He watched you fall in love, mid-text, mid-joke, mid-dream. And now he rests. Sort of. Because rest is a tricky word for someone who never stops moving. So as you lie down, feeling the hush gather at the edges of your thoughts, know this: Hermes is still there. In the space between breaths, in the moment before you speak, in the idea you can't quite name, but already feel. Let your thoughts wander now. Let the stories settle. Let your dreams shape themselves into riddles and poems and answers with no rush. And if you find yourself running in sleep, you're not lost. You're just following a god who always runs ahead. And when you wake, he'll already be gone again. Or maybe he'll be right there. Tapping send. Sweet dreams.